One of the enduring pleasures of travelling across Wales is the continual joy of coming across a place that's just so full of historic interest. Today we're here on the side of the Teifi at Llechryd. Llechryd, the slate ford. Just not far from here, Afon Teifi actually marks the boundary between the three counties, Ceredigion, Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire. But this river is very, very important because this was one of the most significant salmon fishing rivers in Wales, and at this point here at the bridge at Llechryd it's tidal, and that was a very important factor in one aspect of its history. Afon Teifi is a really delightful river. It starts about 70 miles away, just under 70 miles away from where we are today, and surprisingly its source is only about 16 miles inland in the Cambrian mountains, but it prescribes this great arc which travels around first of all eastwards and then comes westwards down through Carmarth, through here at Llechryd, and of course disgorges into the sea at Cardigan. This bridge is an absolute architectural delight, with its really lovely, elegant arches, its cutwaters, and sources indicate that it was built on or near to the site of an early ford. We know there was a bridge here during the medieval period. This present bridge dates from the 17th century, and somewhere there's a date stone of 1658, but I haven't yet been able to find it. And what I find absolutely fascinating about this, here we have an ancient bridge but carrying an enormous amount of traffic today. Immediately alongside the main Llechryd bridge is this other architectural delight, this elegant arch that spans a cut that was known as the canal. Now, this never ever carried barges or navigable craft. It was called the canal, but in actual fact it was a watercourse that tapped the river way upstream and carried water down to the tin plate works that was about half a mile behind me down the drive. The tin plate works dating from the 1770s and operating up to the 1800s. And this bridge is marked by this rather delightful cast iron plaque. The reason why the tin plate works were established here was because of the plentiful supplies of charcoal that were available locally. And of course charcoal was used as a fuel in the tin plate making process. And that was coupled, of course, with the fact that the river was tidal up to the bridge, so the finished products could be transported downriver to ships waiting at the quays in Cardigan. I just love the way that you come across unexpected bits of history, like this small building behind me. I had no idea it was here, but looking at it looks suspiciously like, to me, something from the Second World War, either a pillbox or a lookout station where you could watch out for German tanks coming across Llechryd Bridge. But this site has been a place of conflict for many hundreds of years. Just an example, in the 1840s, the Rebecca rioters came along and destroyed a weir and fish trap on the river. This is another great example of interpretation, and it's just staggering. A little place like Llechryd, there is so much history to be found out about it, explained so beautifully on these panels. Just looking around on these panels, so many notable individuals who were either born or lived in this community over the past couple of hundred years. There's one, however, that we're particularly interested today. That is Sir Benjamin Hammett. What an interesting character he was. He was the son of a barber in Taunton, and he had a job as a footman in a large country house in that area. He had the very good fortune to marry the sister-in-law of the owner of that house. And she came to the marriage with a dowry of £5,000, which was a whacking great amount of money at that time. And that provided the foundation for Sir Benjamin Hammett to grow and expand his business. He became businessman. He was Lord Mayor of London. He was an MP. You name it, he did so many things. And he came here to Llechryd in the 1770s, and he established a tin plate works. Now this tin plate works was considered, during its heyday, within the next 20 or 30 years, was considered to be the second most important tin plate works in Wales, second only to Melyn Griffith near Cardiff. There's another Teifiside treat to be explored, but to find out a little bit more, we have to go upstream. I know it's a cliche, but you could easily describe this place as somewhere where time has stood still. And of course there is this wonderful sense of timelessness about it. There's been a place of religion here for, we think, 1,000, maybe 1,500 years. And it was dedicated to the Celtic saint Llechryd, who was renowned for his miracle making. Parts of this church date from the medieval period, including this lovely 13th century font. And there's also the marvelous 15th century bell, which is inscribed Sanctae Laurentae Orae pro nobis. St. Lawrence, pray for us. It evidently rings F sharp with harmonics of B and D sharp. Well, I don't know how many churches in Wales where you find a coracle that was an essential part of the church equipment. This is a very important coracle because it actually carried Bernard Thomas of Llechryd across the English Channel. But it was important because when the river flooded, and indeed this area very prone to flooding before the river changed its course, the coracle was important because it might have been the only means of getting the parishioners back home after the service. It's a lovely quote associated with the river. This is in 1668, and the parishioners petitioned the Bishop of St. David's about the then rector, who had no regard for the cure of the souls, and although often desired by the parishioners to dam the most violent course of River Teifi upon the floods, he had allowed 2 very fine meadows, which were the flower of the glebe land, to be wasted by inundations. And if that wasn't enough, he compounded the parishioners' wrath by engaging, and I quote, the help of a nonconformist minister and a carpenter of the same to cut privately, destroy, and fall down 3 young fine oaks that prosperously growed in the churchyard, and were a pleasant ornament and beauty of the outside thereof. In 1804, there were about 30 communicants from the local population of about 750. And what I find interesting was that those communicants included Presbyterians, Methodists, Anabaptists, and jumpers. And what was a jumper? Well, it wasn't a person who jumped from parish to parish or church to church. It was actually somebody who physically jumped up and down in religious fervour, much like a Quaker or a Shaker. For the past 100 years and more, there have been constant comments about the condition of this church, because it did at times fall into disrepair, but it was due to the work of incumbents, local volunteers, and since 2000, this church has been in the care of the charity, the Friends of Friendless Churches, and they have done so much in Wales to preserve these important parts of our religious heritage. Just as I came in this morning, I picked up this lovely leaflet on the table just inside the church, full of fascinating information. It says, for instance, that the charity Friends of Friendless Churches was formed in 1957 by Welshman Ivor Bulmer Thomas and a founding group drawn from the worlds of politics, art and architecture. But I love this quote, quite a long one. Our founders believed that an ancient and beautiful church fulfills its primary function merely by existing. It is, in itself, and irrespective of the members using it, an act of worship. A beautiful church, whether standing alone in the countryside or surrounded by wharves and warehouses, offices and houses, is a perpetual reminder of spiritual values. Such churches are sermons in stone, and their message is delivered not for half hours on Sundays, but every hour of every day of every year, and not merely to those who enter, but to all who pass by. So many of our churches were so-called improved during the 19th century, especially towards the end of that century. So it's such a relief to come to a place where we can find these marvelous 18th century pews. And when I think about it, even before these pews were installed, this must have been quite an austere building. I just love the peace and tranquility of Afon Teifi Church. And in the 18th century, there were quite extensive alterations when these wonderful box pews were constructed. And I love the way they demonstrate the social and economic hierarchy of the time, because here I am sitting in this box pew, which was complete with its own fireplace. So obviously, this was to accommodate one of the wealthier families. And there's another one just across the way. But then as you move back down the church, you just have ordinary box pews, or sometimes just simply benches. You don't have the benefit of a roaring fire. There are other indications of status here in the church. And you can see that whoever it is was responsible for the financing of these box pews had them decorated with these rather elegant fluted columns. There are quite a few pews in this church, although nowhere near as many as a report of 1813 said, when they could accommodate 1,000 people. I think that was stretching the facts just a little too much. The walls of this church, well, they're adorned with memorials to various local families. And this one I just love because it reads like a newspaper report. It's difficult to read, I know, so I've got the transcription here. This is what it says. It's in memory of Charles Colby, 98th Regiment, who died at Rawalpindi in India on the 27th day of March, 1852. Seized on and torn by a tiger which he'd previously wounded, he survived the dreadful injuries for a few hours. The quotation at the base of the memorial is particularly apposite. It reads, "Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come." There's a story, which of course must be apocryphal, but the story was that the family were told that Charles was killed in action, and so they wanted his body to be brought back home. And in due course, the coffin arrived, but it was a very odd shape, and evidently there was a very peculiar smell emanating from it. And so they opened the coffin, and inside they found the remains of a tiger. And so this wonderful nonsensical story goes, they then wrote to find out what this was all about, and they had a message back which said, "Tiger in box, Sahib in tiger." Evidently, there was a holy well not far from here that was dedicated to Saint David. And it may be that that was the reason why, at a later date, this church was dedicated in the name of our patron saint. These railings are really excellent examples of decorative ironwork. But of course, it was usually only the wealthier families who could afford them. Reading the inscriptions on these gravestones in this church and in so many other churches is like opening a book on local social history, because so much about the lives of our forebears are recorded in stone in places like this. This is an absolutely superb example. Look, it even has its own very own roof to protect it from the elements. And there's so much information on this gravestone. I need my glasses on this one. Just for example, it says, "Here are deposited the remains of Erasmus Saunders, and he departed this life on the 25th day of January in the year 1759, aged 40 years. So he was doing okay. And here's another remarkable one here. This is to Jane Saunders, and she died on May the 21st, 1806, aged 93 years. So what a remarkable period of time she actually lived through. And so on we go, and then we get down to, just here, Susan, who died 3rd of December 1790. God bless her. She was just 6 weeks old. Just looking at some of the comments in this visitor book. Oh, a wonderful find. May it be here for years to come. Blessed are the friends of friendless churches. That's somebody from Plymouth. And then we go on. A beautiful place, well kept. Beautiful and peaceful. That's signed by Alice from South London. And a lovely bit of history, very much appreciated. That's Debs of Aldershot. I think this church is just absolutely wonderful because it is so important as one of the lovely Teifiside Treats. So often when I'm sitting by running, flowing water, I'm reminded of the poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson, The Song of the Brook. Just a couple of lines from it where he says, "Men may come, men may go, but I, the brook, the river, the stream, whatever, but I go on forever."